I want to start by saying I apologize. I actually cut this down to 4 mistakes versus the 5. I realized when I timed this session after originally coming out with the 5 different points, that 4 was going to be a much better number because we wanted to focus on the most important ones and make sure that we didn't go over our time. So I felt like the top 4 were the ones that made the most sense. The 5th one really could use its own session in and of itself, but we're going to skip that one for now and just focus on the best, which is the top 4. And these are mistakes that I've seen other people make when building their sites, specifically travel sites. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Micaiah Fender, and I'm the founder of Atlas Republic. I used to work for Virtuoso on the Virtuoso.com team, and I did digital marketing for them for a number of years, and I also worked on social strategy. Of course, I worked for Virtuoso for about 10 years. And after I left about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I started working with suppliers and agencies on their travel websites, and I realized pretty quickly that they really needed not just new versions of their old websites. What they really needed was a complete change of philosophy and mindset when it comes to thinking about positioning, rebuilding, and rebranding their online travel site. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, I think, in re-educating people on how they should position themselves. The good news is that you're already really good at it. You just don't know it yet. You just don't know how to translate that into the digital realm. And so I'm on a personal mission to help you with that. So we're going to be talking about some of the mistakes I've seen, and hopefully you'll take away something that you can use that's concrete, that you can use to start doing or rebuilding your current site, or maybe even doing a little bit better with the site that you currently have. Now, this is also a lot of information. I get that. Don't worry about absorbing it all. This is all new, I think, to a lot of people. And this is based around about 2 years of the research that I've been working on. And I think that, this is a lot of information. I realize that, but just take it step by step. And I think you'll pick up a few things. At the very least, you'll pick up a few things that will help a lot. So before we actually start, a couple of housekeeping notes. Number one, the Q&A is available for you. If you click on the grid at the top of the webinar screen, you can access the Q&A session by clicking the Q&A button. And you can ask a question anytime throughout the session. I won't see it necessarily because I'm in presentation mode, but as soon as I'm done with the session, towards the end, I'll open it up for questions, and I'll look at this question screen to determine if there are any questions. And then I'll answer them live on the session. So let's talk about what you're going to learn. First, you're going to learn a little bit more about yourself, and who doesn't love to learn about themselves, what content you need to create for your travel site, how a travel site should qualify leads, and how to track what matters. We're going to skip the 5th point, which is how to engage your team. If you have a team, if you're an agency, or if you're a manager, we're going to skip this part. Really, I'm going to set aside some time to focus on this at a later date because I think it's super important. Because without other people contributing to the content of your site, this whole philosophy kind of falls flat, or it doesn't fall flat, but it's hard to maintain. And it is effective, but you have to work at it. And so sometimes having your team engaged really helps. And the last but not least, I'm going to give away a bunch of free stuff. And this isn't just free stuff. This is years of hard work that we put together, that we use for our clients and also for our own site and for ourselves at Atlas Republic, that we use currently, and that I'm going to give to you for free. And we'll give that to you at the end of this session. So I want to start with something called the broken window theory. And I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it was actually an experiment that some scientists got together and performed in the late 70s, excuse me, where they proved that if you have a building with a few broken windows that go unrepaired, the tendency is for vandals to come and break a few more windows, and then pretty soon litter accumulates, and then pretty soon graffiti starts to show up, and then all of a sudden there's crime in the neighborhood. Now it sounds really crazy, but they actually proved that, and they did another experiment where they threw a little bit of litter at a parking lot, and eventually more litter accumulated, and then cars were broken into and crime escalated from there. So this is the same theory that Rudy Giuliani actually put to practice in New York in, I think it was the late 80s, where he drastically reduced the crime rate in New York within 1 year of being in office. He used the broken window theory. His idea was that if you crack down on the petty crime, like things like broken windows, or the small time traffickers or criminals or thefts, if you're hard on those people, it's, you crack it on the small stuff, the big stuff will sort of take care of itself. And that's exactly what happened. If you know New York now, it's a vastly different place than it was in the late 80s. And that's because of the broken window theory. He credits this directly to the broken window theory. So I'm stealing this theory and I'm renaming it, called the broken brand theory, because I think this is an excellent analog of what's happening in the travel industry, specifically with travel agencies today. A lot of agencies are not taking care to clean up their online brand. And this calls into question, at least from the research I've done, it calls into question the business of the agency, but also the model of the entire agency model into question in the minds of people who would otherwise probably become lifetime clients of the agencies that they're working with. So my point is if you don't take care to clean up every aspect of your online brand, especially online where people are actually doing, finding out about you and potentially doing business with you, then that actually puts your entire brand into question, but also the model of the entire agency model. And since so many agencies are so bad at this, and actually tour operators too, are so bad at this, a lot of travel companies, in fact, then this is something that needs to be addressed. So I think this is a really important starting point for understanding, you probably already know you need to clean it up, but I want you to know why it needs to be cleaned up and how doing little things can make a huge difference. So let's get into our first mistake. The mistake that I have seen people that I've worked with make is that they have no idea who they are or who they want to attract. And that's pretty powerful. And I know it sounds simple and you're thinking, well, what does this have to do with building a website? And I want to illustrate this with a story about Socrates, who is probably one of my heroes, philosophical heroes. And Socrates was very well known for making very smart people realize just how little they knew about themselves, life, and philosophy in general. He wasn't, he didn't really focus on people's strengths in a skill set necessarily or a trade. He knew they knew that, but what he questioned was their idea about who they were. And my favorite story about Socrates is about a young Euthymides who was thinking about getting into politics, and he approached Socrates and he asked him, why he should get into politics, if he should get into politics, and sort of what his founding, what Socrates thought about his reasons and his founding principles were. And so after a few rounds of questioning using the Socratic method, which Socrates was obviously known for, young Euthymides quickly capitulated and realized that he knew nothing about politics or his principles or really who he was. And then his question changed. He asked Socrates, what can I do to render myself more capable of understanding who I am and what I want? Obviously, that would be the next logical question. And Socrates says, have you ever been to the temple at Delphi? And Euthymides says, yeah, I've been there twice. I love that temple. He says, have you ever read the inscription on the front of the building? He says, yeah, I've seen it both times. It says, know thyself. And he says, well, it's not enough to have read it. What you need to know is to understand it. You understand who you are. And what Socrates was trying to say is that if you don't know who you are, you'll never know what you want. And you'll never know who you are if you don't ask yourself the difficult questions, right? So you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with a travel website? Well, we need to figure out who we are and what we want and who we want to attract, because that is the key to unlocking the difference between a regular online business card, which is what most people are doing nowadays, and a really engaging site, especially a travel site. So let's break this down. I want to illustrate this with a traveler's journey. Okay, so the fictional character at the center of our story here is Amy. Now, Amy is at your travel website currently, right? She's visiting your site. Actually, we don't even know her name is Amy. I'm completely making this up. But the point is why is Amy here? Why is she at your travel site? Well, she could be here for, just scratching an itch. She could be curious, right? She could be here to actually be inspired about a destination. She could be here to make some comparisons on different products, or maybe on which advisor to work with, or she could be here to actually book something and she knows she wants to use an advisor, but she doesn't know who to use. The problem is we don't really know why Amy is here at your website, and we don't know how we or you can help her, right? That's important. And why don't we know? Because obviously there's no way to ask her, right? It's digital, it's not that easy. Google doesn't reveal search terms anymore, so it doesn't really tell us that much about why she's there. And by that, I mean Google Analytics. And referral source is just not enough, meaning that you may look in your analytics suite or maybe use it, maybe you don't, but looking at the referral source of where Amy came from, it's just not enough. It doesn't work. It's not relevant to you in terms of why she's there. To make this even more complicated, Amy could be any version of herself while visiting your website. So which version of Amy is visiting your site today, right? And if you've heard of the 6 travel buying phases, or the travel buying life cycle, where there's different phases a traveler goes through when making a purchase decision to buy and to book travel, then that there's different needs in each of these phases. Amy in the dream phase might have different needs from Amy in the planning phase, or Amy in the booking phase, or maybe Amy who's getting ready to travel, right? So there's different needs that Amy has that she might have found your site through different reasons, and it's impossible for you to know. And if you don't know, it makes it really difficult to know how to help her. So if you haven't heard of the travel buying journey, I just want to take a quick aside just to jargon bust this. The travel buying journey is simply a set of distinct phases that have been going on in the travel industry for quite some time, that have been assessed and understood by travel marketers, that travelers go through different phases when making a purchase decision, and even when they're actually traveling. Now, there's different numbers of phases that people sort of go back and forth on, but we've actually identified 6 distinct phases ourselves in our research. And we found that the dream, plan, book, and prepare, travel, reflect stages are what make up the travel buying journey. Now, we're going to use this a lot because really what we're doing is we're taking a traveler first approach to all of our websites from this point forward. Okay, you are going to take a traveler first approach. I want you to remember that, because that's important. And this journey is an important part of that. So let's get back to our story. So the whole point of all of this is that if we don't know why Amy is visiting your site, excuse me, then how can we provide a relevant and meaningful experience to her? Now, I want you to think about that, because think about Google. When you type in a search term, Google's whole goal in life, in fact, they're the reason why they're as big as they are and popular as they are, is because they understood the meaning of relevance. They understood the power of giving you what you were searching for in a very short amount of time. That's what made Google what they are. So obviously relevancy is super important and super critical, right? You have to treat your site sort of like Google does, where somebody finds you for something, a keyword or a term, and maybe they were linked to you from somewhere else. Well, you need to be relevant to that call or that search or that desire. And if you don't know how to be relevant, meaning if you don't know what they're looking for, then how can you be relevant to them? So this is super important. This is a question that really not many people ask, but should be asking. And you should be asking this about your own site. So kind of confusing, right? Well, let's clear it up. I want to introduce a term called the inbound methodology. And I know that's a little bit of jargon, and I don't want you to be scared of it, because it's actually quite simple. It really means nothing more than to stop selling and start providing value. Stop pushing out offers, stop pushing out emails, and start providing value. That's it. We're going to talk about how that works. And I'm going to give you an overview of how this works, and then we're going to break each section down a little bit more. So the general idea is that, as we talked about before, Amy's a little bit different in each stage, right? So she visits your site and she doesn't know, in each stage, she has different needs. In the dreaming phase, she might be inspired, need to be inspired. So the type of content you're going to create are general articles on destinations, big, beautiful travel images, general video on destinations, editorial content, social content, things that will get Amy inspired to travel. All right. And in the planning phase, she has different needs again. So she needs to know what her options are. She knows where she wants to go and what she wants to do. Now she just needs to know what her options are there, and she needs to validate those options and make sure she's making a good choice for her and her travel companions. So the content you're going to create to attract someone like Amy in the planning phase is going to be product comparisons, downloadable guides, video product tours, something more product specific or solution specific. Not so general as we did in the planet or the dream phase. You could do live advisor discussions where you actually help Amy figure out the right options for her in the destination. And then we have the booking phase where her needs are very different. She needs to compare, validate, and most importantly, get the best value. Now, this is the phase where you talk about bookings, actually pushing out offers, whether that's via email or via social sites or whatever channel you decide to use. This is more about rates and dates. Now, the important thing is you notice that there's 3 other phases or 2 other phases before this. And if you don't work with those 2 other phases, then you're not going to build a relationship or build the trust needed for Amy to book with you in this phase. And sometimes you'll get those people who just book, but you'll notice probably more often than not, those people aren't ones that stay a long time, or they don't necessarily rebook, or maybe their loyalty isn't as strong as somebody that you worked with from this first phase. Okay, so now let's just say hypothetically that we've created the content that we need to create for Amy in the different stages. How do you actually get Amy to these different pieces of content? Right? How do you become Google, right? She searches for something and she finds you and she gets there. Now, how do you get her to this information, right? Part of it's through search terms, right? Finding that specific page through a search. But if she's already on your site, then how does she get to all the relevant information for her? And we do this through what's called a call to action, which you've heard probably a million times. It's a marketing, tool that everybody and their brother uses, and they should, because it's effective and it's important. And really all a call to action is a promise to fulfill a need that you've identified, right? And we'll talk about how you identify that, but just know that call to action is how you get someone to the content they need. And I'll give you an example of this quickly, and then we'll move into it a little bit later. But here's a fictional website where there's actually 3 call to actions, and you can see one's a little more prominent than the other 2, but they all speak to different needs. And can you guess what those needs are, or what part of the cycle each one speaks to? You could probably take a guess. Inspire Me is probably not necessarily book or not necessarily plan, right? It's more about what? Dreaming, right? The Plan My Trip is obviously more about planning a trip. And Special Offers is going to be more about booking, right? Someone who's interested in offers and dates. They know where they want to go, or maybe they're looking for something specific to trigger something, but they know they may want to book something. Right? So this is an idea of what call to actions look like, and we'll talk about these a little bit deeper later in the session. And the last part of this methodology, this inbound methodology, right? First was content, second was getting people to the content, and the third part of this is actually measuring efficacy, right? Measuring how this all works. Measuring this so that you know if you can rinse and repeat and get the same results again and again and again. Right? So this is analytics, and this is probably the nerdy part that most of you like, or maybe don't like, or maybe you're just not clear on. And coming from a travel background, I completely understand this. And so my job is to make it as easy as possible for you to get a better understanding of how you can measure your results and how you can rinse and repeat. All right, so let's talk about how this all works. Like, how do you actually start doing this? Okay, let's dive into this a little bit deeper, right? So first you need to determine who your Amy is. Okay, we talked about Amy before. She's fictional. She visited your website. She has different needs in each of the travel buying phases or the travel buying journey. Her needs are distinct in each phase. Well, you need to figure out who your Amy is. And we do this through something called traveler personas. And you may have heard of marketing personas before, maybe traveler personalities, whatever you like to call them. It's irrelevant. The important thing is that you understand that a traveler persona in this context is simply a blueprint of your ideal client or customer created through, and this is the important part, real research, right? So if I could say, cut out the 80% of people that you don't want to work with and take your top 20%, the people that really you love, or maybe it's even bigger, maybe it's 30% of your clients are people that you really would like to clone and wish you could just cut out the rest and deal with those 30%. Well, that's all a traveler persona is identifying who your top clients are and then creating a blueprint of them, asking questions to figure out who they are, what they want in each of the distinct phases, what their needs are. And then it's going to be easier from that point forward, because this will help guide every decision you make. Everything from building your website to building your marketing materials, everything you do from this point forward will be easier because you're attracting the right person. So here is a fictional instance of our persona, our traveler persona named Adventure Amy, because we discovered as we sat down with our clients that we asked them questions about their goals and their needs in each of the different phases. And we have ways of doing this, which we'll talk about. But we asked them, what sort of travel they were into. And we noticed that there was a trend. Most of our clients that were at our top 20% all tend to lean towards adventure travel. And so we named her Adventure Amy because we know that that is what those clientele, that's what they liked the most. That was a trend within the data. So we put together a fictional profile of Amy, sort of the age range, the household income, any geographic, demographic information we could find. But then we also put down, most importantly, her goals and her goals in each of the distinct phases for the travel buying journey. Okay, we'll talk about how we get to these goals and how we ask those questions. But just know that you could have one of these profiles, you could have 6 of these profiles. One of our clients actually is planning 7 of these profiles because there's many different agents they work with or advisors they work with. And they, or actually in this case is a tour operator, and they have staff that all sort of specialize. So their profiles are a little bit different, but they have 7 of them. And that makes a big difference because now they know all of their content they put on their site should be focused on one of those 7 or all 7 of those people. So how do we get the questions for each phase, right? This is called question mapping. And this is similar to content mapping, which we'll talk about. But question mapping is simply asking an interview question for every travel phase, right? So there's 6 distinct phases. So what you would simply do is ask a question about their goals in each of those phases. And we have a template, and you probably are trying to screenshot this, or maybe you're not, but I actually have this as a template with this content in here. This might not look really super fresh on your screen, this particular, because it's a screenshot and it's kind of crunched. But I have this as a template, and I'm going to provide this to you at the end of the session. And this is based on work that we've done and based on work that we're doing with our clients and also with our own personas that we do for Atlas Republic, right? Because we're trying to attract the right people as well. And we do this through personas. So these are questions that we actually ask our own clients, and our clients ask their clients about their different goals in each of the different phases. And just know that this is called question mapping, and you can do this. This is actually available for you, and we'll give that to you at the end of the session. So the takeaways of this first part, which is the persona, the traveler persona, is ask yourself which of your current clients are your dream clients, and then simply interview them to determine goals for each stage. Look for trends in responses, and then create personas around the findings. Okay, so let's talk about mistake number 2. And that is they don't know what content to create for their websites. So their first mistake was not knowing who they wanted to attract. So they just put up online business cards and sort of attracted a spray and pray approach, attracted whoever they could and tried to go from there. right? Well, that was their first mistake. They didn't know who they wanted. Mistake number two is they didn't know what content to create to attract the right people, right? So you can probably guess where I'm going with this. But I want to start by illustrating this point with a story. And this story, being a history geek, is all about history again. And this is another historical figure, P.T. Barnum, who, as you probably know from P.T. Barnum and Bailey's Circus, actually didn't start in the circus. He started in the American Museum in New York. And this was a museum, not surprisingly, of curiosities and oddities and weird things. And his first job was to get people in the door. No big surprise there either, considering he ultimately started essentially becoming a carnival barker to get people in the door of the circus. So that's where he got his start. And on the first day of the job, he was approached by a beggar in the street. And the beggar asked him, of course, for some money. And P.T. Barnum suddenly had an idea. He wasn't going to give him money. He was going to give him a job. And his job was very odd. He was asked to, every day, make a circuit of New York, a small circuit of about 4 or 5 city blocks. And he was to exit the front of the museum, exit the back of the museum, make the circuit around the streets, and then re-enter through the front of the museum. And while he did this circuit, he was to carry 5 bricks, laying down a brick throughout the circuit. And on the way back, he would pick up 1 brick, or lay down the brick that he had in hand and pick up a brick and make the circuit around the block again. So this is very odd because back then no one had ever seen anything like this. He was dressed in a suit. He was taking his job very seriously. He had a smile on his face, and he would make a circuit and drop these bricks. And then on the way back, he would always keep a brick in hand, pick them up, and then redo the circuit, go through the front of the museum, go through the exhibit, come back out of the back, and then make the circuit again. By the end of the first day, back then no one had ever seen anything like this on the streets of New York. Nowadays, he'd probably be ignored. But back then it was a spectacle. No one had ever seen anything like this before. And by the end of the first day, P.T. Barnum had attracted about 400 people that would crowd around his brickman trying to find out what this guy was doing and what the circus, or the museum had to do with it. Well, by the end of the second day, he had a cease and desist from the police because he was impeding traffic with the about 7,000 people who were crowding around trying to figure out what was going on with this whole spectacle. So he noticed that people would follow him inside of the museum, and then of course they'd have to pay the admission to get in. They'd debate what was going on. Some people would actually just get distracted by the exhibits and walk through. And so that was his start. And he was later quoted as saying that every crowd has a silver lining, that if you have an interesting enough brickman, people will stop to see him, and given a gentle nudge, they'll pay to see your exhibit. Right? So his point, and I think this is illustrated pretty beautifully, is that the way this relates to a website, which sounds kind of crazy, but the point is you need a brickman, right? You need content so compelling that people stop to see your circus. Simple as that. So let's talk about how that works. So we already know that we have our Amy, right? We've done the work, let's say, to create the persona of Amy, our adventure Amy. And we know her goals in each of the distinct travel buying cycles. Right? We know in different cycles she has different goals. So what do we do here? We do something called content mapping. This is actually pretty simple. This is simply just like question mapping. It's instead of asking a question for every stage or part of the travel buying cycle, we actually build content around the needs of our fictitious Amy or persona for each of the different phases. Now, this is very powerful because not only are you understanding who your Amy is and you're understanding what her needs are, but now you have a map, right? A blueprint of how to create content that can fulfill or help Amy solve her problems in each of the different phases. And what's great about this is that this is a very organic process, because when you build the right content, get indexed for the right keywords, you're found naturally and organically, and Amy starts to understand that you're a place that understands her, right? So this is very powerful. So this is an example of what the content mapping can look like. Again, Dream Phase is focused purely around inspirational content. So things you would create would be pictures of far-flung adventure-based destinations, because remember, we're talking about adventure travel here. Simple articles on recent staff adventures. Maybe you have staff that do some of these educationals or FAMs, and they come back from an educational and they write an article on this, right? And it's focused around Amy's needs, right? It's all about inspiring her to travel, or in this case, your clients to travel, or future clients to travel. And the same for the plan, book, prepare, travel, and reflect, which I won't get into here, but you get the idea of how this works. The other part I'd like to point out is that channels are simply just methods or platforms to promote these different types of content on. And they will be distinct, because you wouldn't necessarily, promote an offer on social media. You might, but for the most part, you're going to stay away from that, because social is all about the dream phase, maybe a little bit about the plan phase, and absolutely about the travel and reflect phase, right? But not necessarily around the book phase, not around offers. This would be more email, and you may not use email for something like travel, right? You might, but it's more going to be around offers and things like that. So the channels will be distinct, can be distinct, there will be overlapping, but this is an example of what this can look like. Now, again, I actually have a template of this that we've put together that one of our clients have actually used, and this actually comes from research we've done. So you can actually use this yourself as a sort of guide to create different types of content for each phase. And that's going to be available to you along with the other persona template that we'll give to you at the end of this session. So let's wrap up this content section, right? So you now first created, figured out who you needed. Now we talked about content, and the 3 takeaways from the content are: keep your traveler's persona in mind whenever creating a piece of content, right? Your goal is to help them solve their problems, and they will come back to you. Map each piece of content to each travel phase and also map all of your travel phases to the different needs, right? Figure out the needs, the travel phases, and then map the content accordingly. And then also map out all your channels to the different phases, and make sure you're clear when whoever is publishing this, whoever's on your publishing or production team, or your website team, that they are using the appropriate channels when promoting this content. Having a place where everybody knows what to do is really, really helpful and keeps everybody on the same page. Okay, let's talk about the third mistake, and then we have one more mistake, and we'll wrap this whole thing up. Number 3 is the website is not qualifying leads. I hear this a lot, that people are getting a lot of people who are just kicking tires. Maybe they're doing AdWords and they're sending them to a landing page that's all about offers and rates and dates, and they're supposed to fill out a quote form. Well, these people fill out a quote form and they usually never follow up, or they just don't really have the money, or maybe they're just kind of kicking the tires. Maybe once in a while they'll get some leads, but for the most part, the debt to income in that sense, spending on the AdWords and getting people to these pages is really not adding up in terms of the overall leads that you're getting. So the problem is that your website's not actually qualifying leads like it should. And also, when people get to your site and they find your site, how are they getting to the right content, right? And this is a part of qualifying, to make sure that you have the right Amy or the right persona, and their problems are the problems that you've identified. And it's qualifying them to make sure that it's speaking to their message or their needs. And really, it's like a salesperson, right? Your website should be a salesperson. In fact, it should be the highest performing salesperson on your team in many ways, meaning that it does a lot of the hard work of getting people to the site, helping them understand their needs, qualifying them, building that trust in that relationship, and then getting them booked like any salesperson should. Okay, did you feel that? Maybe panic, maybe a little frustration. What the heck happened? Did you accidentally close out? What's going on, right? That was the feeling you probably just had seeing a blank screen. Well, that is what it's like when there's no clear call to action, right? That's what it feels like when somebody comes to your site and they found you through a search term, or they found you through a link, and they click on your site and it's like, what do I do from here? I was promised something specific. I was searching for something specific, but I really don't know what to do next. So therefore, I'm going to leave. How many times have you been to a site where you've searched for something on Google, came to a site that you thought looked promising based on the headline, and then you come through and it's not there, it's not clear, or the information isn't there, right? That's what it's like when there's no call to action. Call to actions are important because they are all about the traveler's needs, right? And like I said before, when I said pay attention, because we're a traveler's first philosophy now, right? Everything we do is traveler's needs come first. A call to action is simply a promise to fulfill that need. It simply helps the person find the content that's going to help them solve their problems. That's all it is, right? So let's talk about that. Now, this is what a call to action could look like, and this is fictional. But you'll notice that on this fictional blog post of packing and family travel supplies, which again, if you are paying attention, you probably noticed that it's focused on a specific phase of the travel buying journey, right? It's not dreaming, right? It's going to be something different, like maybe planning, or maybe even preparing, right? It's going to be a different phase altogether. But in this fictional blog post about packing and family travel supplies, we have something on the right-hand side you probably noticed, and this is what a call to action is. It's a call to help somebody get to content that they feel that might be relevant to them. And if you notice that it's also about the same kind of content, right? It's about family vacation planning, right? Maybe this could say, the anatomy of perfect family vacation created by 5 advisors with over, 25 years experience combined in planning family travel, right? Something to hook them in, to get them to the information that they feel is relevant to them. Now, this could be a download, this could be more information, this could be another blog post, whatever it is. This is essentially a call to action. This is what gets people to the content on your site, that helps them understand that you're a place of information that they never knew about, that they need to know about because it's relevant to them. And you probably saw earlier that we had, call to actions don't necessarily have to be anything specific. They can be links on your site. These are all calls to action. If you notice, there's 3 here. But again, if you'll notice, these call to actions all speak to specific needs. It's not about us anymore. It's not about what we want to push. It's about helping them identify who they are and what they want and getting them to the right place. And in this case, these 3 particular call to actions do that well. So I'm going to give you a quick overview on effective call to actions. This isn't really a how-to necessarily, but I feel this is important to cover. This is more, we're talking philosophically, what you need to think about when rebuilding your site and mistakes other people have made. But here's a couple of points. It should live on your website pages, your blog posts, and should lead people directly to landing pages, which we'll talk about in a second. Shouldn't live on the landing page itself. Copy should be action-oriented, right? A call to action is all about taking an action. So it should encourage something like a click with very clear words. Keep it short and simple. Use attention-grabbing design, something that pops. Lots of contrasting colors always work. Don't be too crazy, but make it look good. And I'll give you examples of that. Use strong on-page placement. Always try to keep it above the fold if you can. It's not always as super important because scrolling is the new clicking. And then test the heck out of these things. Not all call to actions are created equal. And you'll notice a lot of other, in fact, even Google allows you to test different ads with different calls to action, right? Because some call to actions may work better than others. So it's your job to test these and figure out what works and gets people to the right content. So here's another call to action similar to the one we saw before, where there's 3 distinct phases that we're targeting or helping people identify with. Now, if you'll notice that it helps them get to where they want to go, right? But it also does something else very important. What could you think that it does for you as the website owner or the travel marketer? What does it do for you? Right? It helps them get to inspirational content, it helps them understand where to go to start planning something or figuring out what to do, or even preparing. What does it do for you? Can you guess? Well, it tells you something about them and why they're there, right? And if you know something about who they are and why they're there, because if you know they clicked on something that was relevant to them, then if you know that, you can do what? What we're all trying to do, what we talked about earlier in this session, the thing you were supposed to keep in mind for brownie points. Can anyone guess what it is? You can provide a relevant experience. Kapow, right? That's what it's all about. This is the money shot, right? Providing a relevant experience, becoming the Google-like website for your own clients or your own future clients, or your own prospects, being super hyper relevant. Because once you identify who they are, relevancy becomes easy, because then you know how to provide the rest of the content, mapping what we talked about, and everything else that they need to become sticky in their experience. So let's recap this really quickly. Okay, a call to action is simply a clear promise, or a clear promise to scratch an itch, and we send them to some sort of page, or the content talks about what they're going to get. In this case, it's going to be a download, right, about how to plan the perfect family vacation and tools and tips that they can use to do so. Or maybe it's even an application they can download, whatever it is. Whatever it is, it promises something, and they get that through filling out some information, giving you some information about themselves, and then getting the content that they hope for. So that part of the process is complete, right? But what's important here from a marketing perspective, or I shouldn't say marketing, I should say something like from a being helpful perspective, right? Now you know that you can start being helpful in more ways, because you know a little bit more about them and why they're there. And we'll talk about how you track all this in a second. But knowing that they are tracked and that you do know now who they are and what they want, it's easier to provide more relevant information. And you do this through a number of different ways, which we'll talk about a little bit in upcoming training sessions. But this is just the basic idea, is that now you can provide everything from more blog articles, or more specific planning articles, or more specific planning content, or applications, or tools, or whatever can help them further along that journey. That's what you provide in that instance, and you'll know where they're at because you've identified them. Okay, let's go ahead and skip to the next page. Now, what's interesting is that when you create this content on your site, you're probably wondering, well, how do I actually start tracking these? How does that make sense, right? How do I know that they've clicked on an article and read an article? Well, the problem is this is going to be easy to do in your current system. You're going to have to do some work here. In some cases, it's easier than others. You can use different tools. I don't know that analytics actually does this, Google Analytics, in the sense that you can do tagging like this on some content, but I'll talk about this in a minute. But basically, you're going to tag your content, right? You're going to tag them with personas. You're going to tag them with what phase this article targets, and we'll talk about the marketing campaign here. But that's essentially what you're going to do. You're just going to give every piece of content the tag, so that when it's consumed by someone and they actually convert on your site, you'll know their journey. You'll know what types of content they've been interested in, and what you can do for them next to help continue build that trust and to get them nurtured. So the 3 takeaways from the call to action section, and we have one mistake left, I promise. I realize that it's a lot of information, and then we'll close this up, is that call to action should promise, is just a promise to scratch the itch of your personas, right? They came there with an itch, and you're promising to scratch it for them. Be clear, concise, give headlines that are relevant to them, and then also the call to action itself should be a call to action. It should be action-oriented. And be sure to tag all of your content with relevant persona and travel buying information that it targets, because that's how you're going to track it in your system. And that's the next part we're going to talk about. And this is a nerd alert. We're going to talk about analytics here. This is important. I know that this isn't always the most fun thing to discuss when I have a group of creative people, but I promise you it isn't as easy, or isn't as difficult as people have made it out to be. And it actually can be quite fun, because this is which we won't get into here either, but this is what actually gets your team engaged. When they start to see that their efforts are working, and they do this through analytics, you'll do this through metrics and reporting, then it becomes more of a game, and it becomes actually fun to do. So the final mistake I've seen people make, other than not knowing who they were, what they wanted, what content to create, or qualifying leads, the top fourth mistake is that they don't know how to track what actually matters. And what you think matters may not. We're going to talk about that. I want to illustrate, of course. Here I go with my stories. I want to illustrate this point with a historical figure again, because I'm a history nerd, of Napoleon, and controversial because he's, a great military figure, but also very interesting. He did a lot of pretty interesting things in the world that were actually really beneficial to humankind, believe it or not. And what I find fascinating about him was not just his military genius at a young age, but when he got out of the army at 27, he was given his first command of about 30,000 troops. It was the military, or the Italian campaign, actually. And when he showed up, you know, he's fresh out of school, and we're not fresh out of school. He's a couple of years out of school, but had done well in his last posts. They gave him command of an army, and he shows up, and he's super excited. Of course, he's ready to get started. And he finds this army in complete disrepair. I mean, they have no shoes, they have no clean socks. You know, their food supply is short. They're hungry. They have no clean water. Their morale is incredibly down. They've been losing battles left and right. And he suddenly realizes why this was his first command, because people just thought, you know what, give it to him because we're desperate. There's nothing else we can do with these guys. So he shows up and he does something that I thought was pretty interesting because it was so simple. And this is how he really began, is he started by sitting down with his generals and sitting down with his staff and sitting down with his soldiers, as many as he could. And he asked them questions. He asked them questions about what their needs were. He figured out what they needed and what they wanted, just the basics of getting through to the next step, right? Before we start fighting, let's just get the basics covered. And then he went on a campaign internally to get all of these things that he needed for his army: fresh food, fresh water, right? Clean socks, new shoes or new boots, all the things that they needed to actually become an army. And then he started orating. He started building their trust and giving speeches and talking to them more and doing everything he could to motivate them throughout this term. So he went on to lead one of the most brilliant campaigns in his career for the Italian campaign with that army, and furthermore went on to lead one of the most brilliant military careers the world has ever seen, for better or for worse. And you know, it really all started with asking the right questions, understanding what they needed, you know, listening for the feedback was the most important part, and then building that trust from that point forward, right? Using that information to build the trust and start the army and get it moving in the right direction. So you're probably wondering, what the heck does this have to do with a travel website or analytics? Well, the point is that your analytics is your tool to listening to your army, right? For listening for those needs, right? When I talked about earlier, the calls to actions and, you know, how people get to the relevant content, and then it tells you what's relevant, right? It helps you understand what's relevant. Well, the way you understand what's relevant is that you do that through analytics. You understand through analytics what's important. Now, this is a horrible example, and I'm putting this up on purpose, not to scare you, but I'm actually putting this up so I can show you that this is not necessarily relevant to you, right? This doesn't tell you the relevancy of your visitors. What this does is aggregate information, data that's helpful in some ways, honestly, but not that helpful in most ways. And unique page visitors and page views and all these things that you're probably tracking and bounce rates, they're okay to know, but they're not that relevant to what you really need to know. And this is something I struggled with for a very long time working with agencies outside and inside of Virtuoso, is that, and even on virtuoso.com, was that this wasn't necessarily helpful. It just wasn't. So what we need to do is we need to make it more relevant. So again, you know, which Amy is visiting today, right? How does that board that you just saw, right, tell you anything about her needs and specifically where she is in the cycle, right? The travel buying cycle. How does that tell us that? Well, it doesn't. So we need to create additional tracking. We need to know this information. If we're going to be successful, if we're going to put something like this into play, we need to know more. Simple as that. And our needs for this new tracking system is all the basics. We need the page views, we still need the lead source, and we need keyword search data, which Google Analytics does not currently provide. And it also needs to tell us the travel buying phase of the visitor, right? We need to know what phase they're in. Tell us the persona that best fits that visitor. Tell us who that, you know, what person or what persona this person fits into, what bucket this person is visiting us on our website, what persona they most likely identify with, right? And then also we need to know if our call to actions are actually converting people, right? They're actually getting people to click, so that we know if it's not working, we need to start testing new ideas. And then we also need to know if our content goals are effective. Like if we overall want people to read or download something, is that actually working? Is it happening? And this is all parts of an important website. Now keep in mind that you don't have to do all of this. And I want to point that out. This is important because I know this is a lot. For a sophisticated traveler marketer, you could do all this and definitely succeed. For someone who's just starting out, or maybe you're an independent, just keep in mind that some of this is, you can just implement a few of these things, a few of these concepts, and you would still be so much further ahead than so many people are that I've come in contact with. So don't feel like you have to do all of this, but know that this is important if you want to do, if you want to do the whole shebang. Now, the recommendations for our options that we could use as an analytics tool, additional analytics, rather than just Google Analytics, are the following. Kissmetrics, Inbound Now, which is a free WordPress plugin if you use WordPress as your main CMS or your main website. HubSpot, which is an inbound marketing platform, and Atlas Republic, which is the business that I run, and it is also an inbound marketing platform. But the difference between me and everyone else, or us and everyone else, is that we focus only on travel tools, only on travel, period, and only on the travel buying process, which we'll talk about. So the benefit of Kissmetrics over Google Analytics is that they offer keyword data, but they also offer lead behavior. Right? They actually tell you on a lead level. They don't just give you those fancy charts and graphs that you saw earlier. They actually tell you on a lead level what's happening with each person visiting, whereas Google Analytics will never do that. They don't offer marketing persona or viewing of the buying phase, meaning what phase that person is in when they visited your site. Right? But they do offer some basics, and they're a good company. They've been around a long time, and they have a reputable product, and it's a quality product, and I recommend them. Inbound Now offers the extras, right? They offer the keyword data, lead view behavior, and marketing persona tagging, but they don't offer the buying phase at this point. But they do have some pretty cool automation tools, marketing automation tools that you can set up, and it's all WordPress related, and it is free. So for the most part, it is free. I think they have a paid upgrade plan where the basic tools are free, and you can pay to upgrade to a little bit more functionality. But for the most part, it's free, and it's a good product, and it's built on WordPress. So if you use WordPress now, that's a good way to go, right? And they're all about inbound marketing, which is what we just talked about. HubSpot is the prolific king of inbound marketing, and they offer all of the attributes we talked about that you needed. The difference is that HubSpot, they have a lot of really good information. Their training programs are really good, and they have a relatively good platform. The only issue I find with them when putting traveler clients on this HubSpot platform is that it's not travel specific. And I think context is important. It's important to know that what you're doing is focused on your industry and focused on your particular product. And that's partly why I went out and developed Atlas Republic, which is a website building and marketing platform that all focuses around the tools that we talked about, right? I realized there was a need for it, but there was no one doing it necessarily just for travel. And I realized that travel marketers and also agencies who own their own website were not doing a good enough job when I started helping them rebuild. So that's where Atlas Republic came from. And this is available, not quite yet, but you can see that we offer all of these things, and I'll talk about them right now, in fact. So you have the ability to edit and create personas, and these personas can then be added to every single piece of content that you create on the site that we will actually help you build, and it's all travel related, so they're well done in my opinion. And anytime any of these pieces of content are consumed, you'll then see a timeline of events where anyone who visits your sites and consumes one of these pieces of content will actually show you in the analytics tools what this person did on your site. So this is very different than just the charts and graphs. We offer those too, but we give you a timeline of events of what actually transpires on your site. So they found you through a keyword search, and then they read an article, and then they actually subscribed to your list. Well, that article was tagged with the dream phase, and now there shows that this person's in the dream phase. And they found us through a PPC ad, so we know they came from pay-per-click, and maybe this article was tagged with the persona of adventure travel, and this doesn't show this here, but actually this is available, is that it would show adventure travel or adventure Amy or adventure Michael as our persona in this case, right? So we know all this information, and I won't get into this here, but this is where you can actually do some really cool follow up with more content and more relevant help to this person that actually makes you really relevant to them. The last thing it does is it also allows you to create the call to actions in a very simple and clean way. And this is actually a screenshot of our call to action builder, our tool, and our page builder, which I'm going to show you right now. You can create them very easily, name them, and then split test them. And everything that you create in our system is automatically tracked. That's the benefit, right? We're an all-in-one package. You do the website building, page building tools, the ability to edit content very easily, but also we do the marketing side so that, when people visit your website and click on the different call to actions or different links or different articles or whatever you have, it's all automatically tracked. So you don't have to set any of that up. You don't have to go through the process of setting up Google Analytics and doing all the tagging and doing all the goals and the conversion setup and all that. It's all done for you automatically within a sign up. So and actually, before I get to the takeaways, I'll just give you a quick example of what this looks like in real life. If I go to, let me go back here. Where was I? Sorry. I have lost my way on my screen. What happened? Oh. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to escape out of here and I'll give you a quick demo of what this looks like. So this is a example of one of our travel sites. It's actually built. This is a theme that we use that you can use to start your own project. It's simple, it's beautiful. The call to actions are already pre-set up, as you can see here. Now you can change these around very easily, but you'll notice that Inspire Me goes to things like articles, right? Articles about travel that are all about inspirational content. Now these are demo examples, but you would obviously do your own. All of this is searchable, right, through different travel concepts or different travel types. The other option for this page, if I go back here, let's go back to the main page. Help me plan my trip goes to something like, can you guess what that would be? Someone that can actually help them plan their trip. So something like a catalog of advisors, right, where they can actually contact the advisor directly through this and learn a little bit more about them. Right, so this is a real life template that we actually have available on our platform. You can change this very easily. For example, if I go to the sample itineraries, right, and I show, here's a sample itinerary right here. Well, let's say I want to change this sample itinerary. I'm going to go to my admin panel as an example, and that was, which one was it? African Safari, Kenya Safari. So if I launch the page builder, and this is from the admin, your admin for the site, you can see that I can easily create and change around content. So if I wanted to, I don't know, move something around, or maybe I want to add something new in, let's actually add in a template, right? Let's add in, let's look at itinerary blocks and add in something like this, right? I'm going to pen this to the layout, right? So now it's down here and I can start adding things, changing links, changing text super easily. So all this is done just using a page builder, right, that we've created that's available on Atlas Republic that you would use for every site that you have on our platform. And all this is super trackable, super easy to use. You can see the call to actions here. And this is all set up, all built around travel tools to help our travel friends and partners that we work with. But again, you don't have to use us. The important thing is that you use what works for you. Google Analytics is a great tool and you can continue to use it on your site, but it shouldn't be your only source of insights. Go in present mode again. To provide a relevant, meaningful experience, you have to tag all your content. You have to track it. So it has to be done somehow. And you have to find how you're going to do that. And those tools that I mentioned earlier can help you figure that out. And then check out the recommended options and go with what's right for you. Maybe Atlas Republic is not the right platform for you, and that's okay. You can use what works for you or use what you're currently using. We just try to make it super easy, but sometimes changing your entire platform is not always going to work for you. So that's okay too. So we're going to skip the last mistake because this is super important, but it's going to have to be a webinar itself because we're running out of time here. But I do want to talk about results and how long they usually take. If you implement an inbound now approach to your content and your website, if you consistently produce, you'll see results within 3 to 6 months. And I know that sounds like a long ways off, but nothing good is, easy, right? They usually take hard work and a little bit of effort. But if you get enough people involved, or if you work this even just a little bit, you will see results, and you will start to get leads, and you will start to get the right kind of leads. It just takes a little bit more time than something like throwing out an ad. You can throw out ads too, but this is just a different approach that helps people get more involved and more attracted to what you're doing, because it's more of a sticky approach versus just a spray and pray and get people there and sell them a trip kind of approach. So I promised free stuff, and I'm going to deliver on that free stuff. So I'm going to take this link here. This is the guide to personas. It's also a persona template you can use to map out your own personas. It's also a content goal template and question mapping template. 3 templates that you can use right now to implement all the things I talked about. And I'm going to put this inside of our webinar, as soon as I can find it here, in the showcase. So in the link, you should see, or on the website or on the page right now, you should see a new item pop up. And it's called Traveler Persona Questionnaire Template. And you can click on that to get more information about these templates and how they work. Otherwise, I will go to the question and answer section and see if there's any Q&A. I know sometimes it's a little bit difficult for people to use because it's Google Hangouts, so people aren't used to it. But if you have any questions here, it doesn't look like anyone does right now, which is completely okay. Then I will say that's it for now. Thank you for attending, and I really enjoyed sharing some of my experience with you. I hope you got something out of it. And if you have any questions, or if you want to talk about your website, or if you want to talk about your strategy or anything, I love this stuff. I'm a nerd. So feel free to contact me, Micaiah@atlasrepublic.co, or you can always check out our site, see what we're about. Maybe you become a founding member, which we're offering right now at a limited time to sign up in advance and become like an early adopter, which is a special program we have, and I'm very excited about. So I'd love to talk more, and thank you all very much for joining.